If you mention the book of Daniel to people who have grown up in the church and say, what do you remember about the book of Daniel? Most people will say, well, Daniel in the lion's den. That, along with the story of the three young men in the fiery furnace that I shared yesterday, are the two best known stories from the book of Daniel. And our verse for the day comes from chapter 6, verse 4, which is the beginning of that story. It says, so the presidents and the satraps tried to find grounds for complaint against Daniel in connection with the kingdom, but they could find no grounds for complaint or any corruption because he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption could be found in him. So what's happening is people are jealous of him because Daniel distinguished himself, we're told in verse 3, above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. So not unlike, some things don't change even from the times of the Bible, and the pettiness and jealousy of people in a political chain of command is probably one of them. So they want to try to pull Daniel down. They want to besmirch his reputation in some way. So what can they come up with? They come up with the fact that, hey, king, you said anybody who prays to anybody other than you, they should be thrown into a den of lions. Again, this is a whole thing of you have to commit idolatry. You have to worship the king, like we would say in the United States today, the president. And if you don't serve him with complete devotion, throw him into the lion's den. And so Daniel, he is faithful, and he still gets down on his knees 3 times a day, and he prays to God just as he had done previously. So they catch him in the act of praying. He's brought to the king, and the king says, well, may your God whom you faithfully serve deliver you. He felt like he had his hands tied by the law. So then the king went to his palace, and he spent the night fasting. No food was brought to him, and sleep fled from him. So even the king in this case, who is Darius now, is portrayed as a faithful man. He's fasting and praying for Daniel. And of course, in the morning, we know what happens. Daniel is safe and sound, and he is fine. And the people who accuse him, they get brought and thrown into the den of lions instead. And this is a story, of course, to show how God will deliver those who remain faithful to him, just as with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these kinds of stories were meant to inspire faith and courage for people living in difficult circumstances when holding on to the faith actually might have life and death consequences. We're very grateful for these courageous stories of faith for men and others like Daniel.